Whatever it is you're about to do, find someone who's not even remotely interested in it and see if you can catch their attention. Because if you can, you're on the right track. If you can't, then it's a bit of a crapshoot. Because you don't know who's sitting on the other side of the table. So the storyline is a big thing. And this actually fits a little bit with what I want to talk about, that I sort of prepared to talk about. Which is so my experience, like I think all sort of graduate students. So I started graduate school in 2004. And I started these classes, and the classes looked, at least on paper, like all the classes I'd taken before, right? So, and the curriculum looked like curriculum I'd taken before. So you go to your undergrad and you have a series of courses, and in those courses you're asked to read a bunch of stuff, and you're asked to write a bunch of stuff, and you're asked to talk about the stuff that you wrote and read. That's sort of the normal deal. When you go to graduate school, it looks exactly the same. The syllabus looks exactly the same. You're asked to read a bunch of stuff, you're asked to write a bunch of stuff, and you're asked to talk about a bunch of stuff. The problem I discovered in my first year of graduate school is that when you look at the two things, what you suffer is this problem of observational equivalence, in that they look alike and they sound alike, but sort of the things that go on underneath them are not in any way, shape, or form alike. And so if you approach the two things in the same way, you sort of won't get exactly what you're looking for. So let me explain that a bit more. So in my first year, I started taking these courses, right? And I took a bunch of courses, and I read a bunch of stuff, and I wrote a bunch of papers. But something was missing. Okay? I mean, I did well, I did okay. I'm here, right? So I did okay in my classes. But the problem was...
we didn't get you on a... you didn't go into the pool?
Well, I didn't. I didn't just sneak in. Yeah, okay. It was a legit job offer. At least I was told it was a legit job offer. But either way, it wasn't related to my classes. I did fine in my classes. I have transcripts that can sort of verify.
Incidentally, for everyone, he did great in his class.
So either way, so you have this, so the problem was I was doing okay in the classes, so there was nothing to sort of suggest I was on the wrong track, except for when I talked to my senior colleagues or I talked to my professors, they seemed different. So the way they talked about a subject seemed different than the way I talked about the subject. And it didn't feel, so even though all evidence suggested I was on the right track, it didn't feel like I was on the right track. And so I started to poke around a little bit, and I started to ask people, so what's different? What am I doing wrong here? I even read some books, and I'll give you some good references at the end of this for books I think every graduate student should read. About what the difference was. Why is it that I'm doing the same things I did all through my undergrad and master's degree, so why am I not getting to the same place that all these other people seem to be at? And one of the great pieces of advice I got was from an actually very old mentor of mine from Concordia University in Montreal. He said, well, the problem is this problem of observational equivalence, is you're looking at these classes in the exact same way. When you're in your undergrad or when you're in high school, you're taking these classes and you're reading and you're writing and you're presenting to accumulate knowledge. Okay? So you read a book and you want to read the stuff that's there. And you want to take that stuff and jam it in your head and remember it. Right? This is the accumulation model of learning. In graduate school, we're less interested in accumulating knowledge. What we're actually interested in doing is being a critical thinker of knowledge. And so the difference is the accumulator knows stuff. The critical thinker knows whether or not to believe stuff. And that's an important distinction. Because if once you make that distinction and you realize that the objectives are different, that in undergrad you're just trying to know stuff, whereas in graduate school you're trying to know whether or not to believe stuff, that changes the way you approach the fundamental jobs you're doing in graduate school, which is reading and writing. So when you read and write to accumulate knowledge, it's very different than when you read and write to be a critical thinker. So, and one of the things I talked about earlier about storylines, right? So fundamental to all this is the idea of argumentation. So just as a quick example, some of my students are here, so they're going to hear some of this for the 10th or 12th time, and I apologize to them for that. But in class, I often refer to these coffee shop dilettantes. Okay? These are the people that when you walk down the street in Starbucks and you get your latte and you hear them talking about the government, the political system, and they read some book and they know something. And you say, well, that doesn't sound right to me, and then they quote somebody else, and then you say, well, that doesn't sound right, and then they quote somebody else, right? So the method of argumentation for the accumulator isn't to attack the logic of an argument. The method of argumentation for an accumulator is just to keep citing stuff. Right? So
sounds like law school.
Well, a little bit. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So what you want to do, what we're trying to get you to do in graduate school, is to not be an accumulator, but to argue differently, and to argue about the logic of whatever's being presented to you. And the reason we do this is because this is a tremendously much more efficient way to think about knowledge. If you're an accumulator, the only way you can argue, or the only way you can relate in an environment, is if you know more stuff than the person you're arguing with. If you're a critical thinker, and you're approaching knowledge and argumentation from a point of view of attacking logic, you actually have to know very little. And indeed, I often tell people, this is my value added. I know nothing. But I can at the same time, I think, walk into just about any presentation on any topic, and I can offer some insights. Because I can pick apart an argument pretty well. And that, though, takes practice. Okay? And so what we do in graduate school classes, then, is we give you these readings and we give you these writings. And so what you have to learn to do is how to use those exercises to practice the act of critical thinking. So I'm going to give you a couple of sort of, and this is not sort of empirically derived evidence or anything like that. This is my observation. This is the way I attacked this idea of becoming a critical thinker. Okay? So the first thing was reading, right? You get all this stuff to read. Now the accumulator, when they read stuff, starts with the first word on the first page and reads to the last word on the last page. And then they sit down and they take notes and they say, here's all the stuff that was in there. What they're missing in that approach is any sort of systematic approach to thinking about the argument itself. So what I started to do in graduate school was I said, okay, well, let me start to figure out how I can dissect an argument in a paper that I'm reading. So I do this in sort of 3 stages, or a few different stages. I guess it's 3 stages. The first thing I do is I look at an article, and any academic article, they're all written the same, at least the structure is the same. And they have these theme headings, right? So the first thing I do, whether it's a book or a journal article, is I look at the theme headings and I write them down on a piece of paper. Introduction, whatever the next section is, so forth, all the way to the conclusion. And I write that down on a piece of paper, and I look at the piece of paper and I say, okay, what do I think this article is about? And I'll write down what I think the article is about. So what this forces me to do is to develop my own idea about how these themes, these little dashes, sort of connect. So I try to connect the dots myself. I then go and I read the introduction and conclusion, and I see how that jives with what I thought the paper was about. If it does jive, then great. I probably don't have to read a whole lot more, because I already probably have a pretty good sense of what's going on. If it doesn't jive, then I write down again, and I say, okay, well, now what do I think the argument is about? And then, of course, I'll go into the model section or the findings section. But the point here is that I'm not starting at the beginning and reading to the end, but rather I'm trying to find ways to dissect the argument itself. One of the pieces of advice that one of my mentors gave me was, we're not in the business of writing or reading mystery novels. Okay? We're not looking for a grand conclusion at the end or some climactic finish. Indeed, we want to know what happens right at the outset. One of the exercises he gave me was, in fact, which is awful from actually reading mystery novels, but he said, when you read a mystery novel, do actually read the end of it first. And he said, the reason you do this is because, right, magicians know this. Magicians know this. That it's not that, the hand is faster than the eye or whatever it is. It's that the mind is constantly trying to develop patterns. And so when you read the conclusion of a mystery novel first, and then you start reading at the beginning, what you're training your mind to do is to try to find patterns, is to try to find those connections. And it's actually a really great exercise for learning how to think, without having just read all the stuff and then going and thinking about it, but how to sort of actively think as you read. Right? So that's my advice for reading. Take a read. Similarly, though, writing works in the same way. Is that the accumulator, when you're in grad school, right, it's midnight, you've got a paper due the next day at 7, you sit down, you have a beer in hand, and you start writing. Right? Sort of stream of consciousness. You write wine, whatever it is, your beverage of choice. And you start at the first word and you just start writing your stream of consciousness till you have all the stuff you wanted to say down on the piece of